Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mindful on Wall Street's fifth and final installation of our wonderful Mindful Leadership Skills series with Jeremy Hunter. My name is Sarah Wood from Goldman Sachs. For those of you joining us for the first time, Mindful on Wall Street is a grassroots collaboration of mindfulness champions across the financial services industry. We seek to amplify the reach of mindfulness within our respective and peer institutions. One of our shared objectives at Mindful on Wall Street is to equip the individual with tools and techniques to reach their highest potential, to perform in our high intensity roles with greater ease. This is why we are so fortunate to have partnered with Dr. Jeremy Hunter on this very special series, of which today is a special bonus session leading through change and transition, which I'm sure all of us could use some insight on right now. Dr. Jeremy Hunter pioneered one of the first mindfulness-based approaches to personal mastery, and his work redefines and enhances productivity by cultivating the quality of mind in our day-to-day actions and interactions. Jeremy is the founding director of the Executive Mind Leadership Institute at the Drucker School of Management of Claremont Graduate University. He's been voted Faculty of the Year 8 times by students, and when faced with life-saving surgery, 13 former students came forward as organ donors. Jeremy received his PhD from the University of Chicago under the direction of Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, author of Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience, and considered the grandfather of flow, which is the state of high performance. Please also stay tuned until the end for a special announcement on the launch of our ongoing community sessions that will help support the ongoing application of some of the practices we have learned together with Dr. Hunter. With that, I turn it over to Dr. Jeremy Hunter.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks to everybody. I know for some of you it's a holiday, so thank you for spending your time with us. So we'll jump into it. I promise I'll be disciplined today, and we will end on time. Let's see if I can pull that off. So, all right. So I thought this is, as Sarah mentioned, today is a kind of bonus session, and I thought that maybe it would be helpful to do this given some of the questions you're asking and given just the state of the world. And so today's theme is like, how are we dealing with change? And so here's what the session will look like. We'll do a quick review. I'm gonna look at, okay, how do you actually deal with change? We'll talk about transition and how to navigate them. Change and transition sound like they're the same thing, but they're actually not. That's two different things. And we'll talk about why that matters. We'll talk about the 3 stages of transition, and then why, what I call the wisdom of discomfort. The last couple of sessions we've talked about, pain and the relationship of pain, which is, not exactly, what we talk about around a beer, or maybe at least not directly. But how do we relate to pain is a fundamental aspect of life that nobody ever teaches you. And I think one of my core values or assumptions and ideas, not unique to me by any means, is that once you learn how to transform your relationship to pain, then you dramatically transform your relationship to everything else. So quick review, right, that we talked about last time. One thing that mindfulness does is to help you see how you're constructing your own experience, right? And I don't mean that in any kind of mystical way. I mean that, quite literally. It's like, you construct your experience through the stories you tell yourself, the emotional reactions you have, and even the sensations in your body. And that most of the time, that is something that happens so quickly and invisibly, we don't even see how that influences the choices we perceive we have, the actions we take, and ultimately the result we get. And so what mindfulness does is shine a light in that black box to be able to help you see, oh, I have this assumption, or I have this emotional reaction to this person, or, when I see this name on my caller ID, I get a knot in my stomach. And we get to see in a more fine-grained way, how does that influence what you perceive as choice? And so in today's, and then coupled with that, we also have been talking about this idea of red zone, green zone, black zone, right? That the nervous system has different stages of operation, and that, you know, that we can respond to threat oftentimes in an inappropriate way that limits the choices we're experiencing, right? And so ideally learning how to recognize, and a lot of people send me notes saying, wow, I haven't lived in the green zone for years, or, oh, wow, I think I should be paying property tax in the red zone because that's where I am a lot of the time. And so understanding like what zone you're living in, and ideally, hopefully not chronically if it's on the extremes, right? And how that influences choice and then ultimately result, let alone your sense of physical and emotional well-being and all of that. So ideally, when we talk about, when organizations say, our people are our greatest asset, I like to put in the qualifier, yeah, our people in their green zone are our greatest asset. And that if we're kind of chronically living in the red zone or black zone, we're kind of burning up the asset in some way, if we want to apply financial metaphors to human beings. So, excuse me, the other theme, which I just talked about, is the idea that pain is not your enemy, and that pain is information. And I don't mean this in a kind of 50 Shades of Grey sort of thing, but rather like understanding pain as both a stimulus for action, but also information that tells you something needs to change, right? And that pain is a non-negotiable in life, right? That's again something that nobody ever teaches you in school. But then how do we relate to it? And that you transform your relationship to pain, you transform your relationship to fear, you transform your entire relationship to your entire experience. So, all right, that's the review. That sets us up to talk about this wider issue of how do we deal with change and transition, and which we often experience as a kind of pain. So in the chat box, I'd like you to click on that, right? What are the things that have changed over the past few months, right? Flood of frustration, right? I bring out the bad so I can replace it with the good. Yeah, right, that's great. My world has shrunk, I'm more engaged, I feel isolated, decline of activity, decline of action. I can certainly say that, my waistline reflects that. Being isolated and learning to be alone, right? I'm a homeschool teacher now, right? A career move you didn't know you were gonna make, right? I'm more anxious. Hold on, this little window's in the way here. More stressed, more anxious. The way I previously work has changed. Adjustment with family and work due to work from home. These are great. New job, different workouts, no travel, not seeing family, bad dating, right? Yeah, I feel for you. Constantly looking at all the house projects, right? That is an endless thing, isn't it? Let's see, smaller world, yeah, the decline of activity. Chaos keeps going to newer lows, and it doesn't seem to be over soon. Uncertain about the future, right? Harder to connect to other people, increased reactionary behavior. Yeah, I think we can all identify with all of these things, right? So one question that's come up a lot is, how do I motivate my team? And part of why I wanted to add this session is to kind of speak to that, because oftentimes when we're experiencing a lack of motivation, it's because we're in the middle of a transition, and because as a culture we don't really talk about this, we don't really know what to do with that, right? And how to work with that. Okay, so thank you for this. We could obviously spend a lot of time on that, on kind of hearing how everyone's lives have changed, and and the amazing things we've been asked to do in a way for the last few months as well. So let's give ourselves a hand at some level, right? So again, one of the core ideas here is that we have two games to play, right? That there's an inner game and an outer game. And we've been focusing on how the outer game and the inner game are connected, and how do you work with that in real time. So in dealing with change and transition, there is a parallel as well. So, which is that change is about the outer game. Change is external. They're objective events that happen in the world, right? You get married, you get unmarried, you have children, you get a promotion, you move to a different division, right? A virus upends your civilization, right? Those are all external, objective, observable events, right? And so one question we have is that we can ask ourselves is like, how do we meet change? And let me put up a different slide. So how do we meet change? Let me talk about this, and then I will come back here. Right, so, right, here's a book. There are a lot of books on dealing with change. This is one of them. It's a good book called Dangerous Opportunity. And the authors talk about 3 basic ways that we meet change. And on one side, the originator, right, is like, oh, I love change. Steve Jobs, I think, is the penultimate, or is the ultimate kind of originator, right? They love it. They even make it happen. They thrive on it. And on the other side is the conservator. It has nothing to do with political stance, but rather your relationship to experience. Like, you know, I kind of like things how they are, right? I like the stability. I like the tradition. I like the continuity, and I'm good with that. Change, not so good with that, right? And then there are the pragmatists that, okay, I'll roll with it, right? What do I need to do? What do we need to do to make it work? This, I think, is a basic American distribution. Other cultures probably have a very different distribution. My guess is in Japan, you know, where I work a lot, probably the conservator is bigger at some level, I would guess. So if you could click on the screen in the poll, like, where do you think you are? Right, so a lot of pragmatists to our originator. Okay, somebody right there in the conservator camp. Okay. Yeah, great, right? Pragmatists. I have never seen a distribution so oriented around pragmatism. That's fascinating. Now, if you had to like just shake the Etch-a-Sketch for a second, think about, where does your partner fall down on this, right? And is it different, right? Are you the originator and are they the conservator, or vice versa? Or are you living with a pragmatist? Or think about, okay, key members on your team or your boss, right? Where are they? And it may not be different, it may not, or it might be. I'm just curious to know what you might find. Okay, so, all right, nice job, everybody, thank you. So, right, changes happen outside. Transitions, on the other hand, happen inside. And part of this work comes from these 2 really classic, excellent books, recently reissued by William Bridges. And I think they're worth you looking into. If you got the paper or the article I wrote for Mindful that we sent out last week, part of that work is based on these books, and it's quite excellent. You know, they're kind of universal issues, right, that we face over the course of our lives. So transitions are happening inside, right, and they are shifting the story of who we think we are, who we say we are, or if we want to take it to an organizational level, who's the organization, right? Who does the organization think it is? Now, that was interesting. I was flying once right after the United Continental merger, and it was still pretty fresh. And I was flying back from Tokyo, and it was clear that I was with even though it was a United badged plane, it was definitely a Continental crew. And so I got up in the middle of the flight and was chatting with one of the flight attendants, and I said, so how are things going? And she kind of looks around and says, you know, I feel like we're in a flying funeral parlor. And I said, why? She goes, I feel like somebody's died and there hasn't been a funeral and nobody's really acknowledged it. And it was clear what was happening was they were living through the death of the identity of being a continental person. And so, the integration between the two organizations hadn't yet happened. And so I realized, oh, wow, we can carry on organizational identities as well, and not realize that that's something that could be affecting us. So it's shifting the story of who you think you are, who you say you are. Some transitions are reactive, right? Like a lot of what we've been dealing with over the last 7 months has been reactive, right? So something shifts in the outside world and we adjust to it. Other transitions can be proactive and you seek them out. And an interesting case actually is Arnold. Now, no matter what you might think about Arnold, if we look at how Arnold has shifted his career, it's quite fascinating, right? He came from not a well-to-do family and got into bodybuilding, and became a world champion. And then from there started looking around thinking, okay, what could I do? And got interested in acting. And so what he started to do was take lessons, he built a network, he got an agent, and he practiced and he practiced and he practiced. I think he landed the title role of Conan, and then shortly thereafter Terminator, and then the rest is history. And then, he had quite a successful acting career, and then looked around and felt a yearning to do public service. And then again, did the same thing, build a network, learned skills, and then eventually got himself elected governor of California. And I think by reasonable accounts, he did a decent job, right? So transitions can happen proactively. You can actively seek them out, right? And they can happen reactively as well. So they have 3 stages, right? Something comes to an end, right? Something comes to an end, right? It could be a job, it could be an identity, right? You get married and your single life comes to an end. You get a promotion to manager and suddenly you're in a very different kind of role than individual contributor, right? That comes to an end. You finish a degree, you get your CPA, you pass your CPA and something comes to an end, right? And so we're on our way. So transitions begin with endings. And sometimes the transition can happen before the change happens, right? You outgrow an organization, you outgrow a relationship, you outgrow a hobby, right? And then that provokes a change. So an ending happens first. And then we're on our way ideally to a new beginning. But in order to get there, we have this place in the middle, which I call the zombie zone. And zombie zone really isn't accurate either. It's more like, it's like gestation. I think it's a much more apt, metaphor, right? We're gestating. The old sense of self has died or is dying, and we're kind of moving on to a new sense of self. Excuse me. And in this in-between period is a period of gestation. And each one of these stages, and so sorry, in this period of gestation where I think a lot of us are right now, right, it can be very uncomfortable. You're not quite moored to the old world and you're not quite moored to a new world, and we can feel lost, or we can feel like you're not real sometimes, right? Let me talk a little bit more about this. So we move through these stages. Each one of them requires a particular kind of effort. And I want to talk about the effort that we have to make. Because they can be uncomfortable, and because many of us are trained in a very linear, logical way, we want them. Oh yes, the other thing about the in-between is that I also call it the zone of the expensive mistake, right? Like you're trying to search for something, you buy a sports car that really is not appropriate for a person your age or whatever. So in an effort to hold on to what's ended. And so my hope is by understanding how this process works that you make less expensive mistakes, okay? So, right, in our linear view of the world, we desperately want the process to be like this. In fact, one of my students who I write about in the article worked for a bank, you all know, for a very, very long time. And then suddenly decided, because of where the bank was going, didn't want to be involved anymore, and she quit. And it was the first time in 20 some years she had not A, had a job, and B, been associated with this bank. And so her identity was really deeply associated with her old role. And I can remember the moment we were having lunch and these two half-eaten Cobb salads sitting between us, and she leans over me and she goes, "How do I get through this as fast as possible?" Right? To which I had to kind of chuckle, right? And it's like, well, you know, we want it to be like this, but the reality is it's like this, you know, it's a wandering. This is, you know, metaphorically, this is Moses wandering in the desert, right? And the metaphor of the desert, I think, is powerful because it's taken away everything, right? The desert is a place of spareness. And so oftentimes, you know, you have to shed everything in order to find the new identity. And that is not comfortable. And so when I talked about earlier on the wisdom of discomfort, the part of the wisdom of discomfort is the capacity to navigate this in-between zone, knowing that it isn't a straight line, and that the wandering for 40 years in the desert is a perfect metaphor for what it means to be in this place, right? So, and the faster we want to get through it, the more that I think the more that it ends up taking. You know, certain things just take time. I can remember, you know, in the world of digital transformation, everything's happening faster and faster right now, right? So you can get your package from Amazon now the same day. You don't even have to wait anymore. And I can remember when my wife was pregnant and we went to go visit the doctor early on. I don't know what I was thinking, but I think it was with that kind of Amazon mindset. I thought, so I asked the doctor, I said, so, you know, how long is this going to take? And she looked at me like, what do you mean, you idiot? She goes, 9 months. And I said, still? So I thought, oh yeah, right. Some things just take time, right? And that we can't rush them. And understanding that in each one of these stages, right, we require a certain effort, right? We require a certain, like a video game, like to get to the next level, you have to slay a certain kind of monster. And that's what I want to talk to you about next, right? This is the different effort that is required, right? So like, how do we experience endings, right? So take a look at this list, right? A loss of familiarity, sadness and grief, shock, uncertainty, right? Something that already came up today already. Denial that this is happening. We've certainly seen our fair share of that. A sense of loss, inexplicable sense of loss, right? Even though objectively maybe something good has happened, you got a promotion or you finished your degree or finished your licensing exam, sometimes we can experience a sense of loss or sadness mysteriously, right, through that as well, right? And so how do we experience it, and then what do we need to do, right? The effort in this zone is to, you know, be honest and admit it's over, and that what's required now is a need for adaptation, right? We need to adapt, right? That's where the pragmatists in all of you kind of come along, right? And how do we let go of what was lost? How do we properly mourn what was lost and acknowledge that? And in an organizational setting, that could be burning the old letterhead. You know, I have students who, we have a letting go ritual actually, and ask them to let go of something that they, you know, that represented an old way of life that no longer fits them. And a lot of times we end up shredding business cards or burning letterhead or something like that, you know, and that having the ritual has a lot of power to it, more than just thinking about, oh yeah, this business card isn't me anymore, right? And then so in the zombie zone, in the gestation zone, right, that how we can experience that is like a sense of being in limbo, being lost. You know, I'm lost in limbo. So one of my clients told me, I'm lost in limbo. And we can feel disoriented and extremely uncertain about what's going on. This sense of disorientation, of feeling lost and feeling unmoored. Let's see, what was the list? Disorientation, disenchantment, like, you know, that the world isn't, the world's kind of lost its sense of aliveness, or you've lost your sense of vitality, or you lose your sense of purpose or value or motivation, right? There's a desperate need to run back to the familiar past, right? Think about sometime when you ended a relationship with somebody, what's the first thing you do, right? you go back and you call the old boyfriend or girlfriend, right? We want to go back to what we know. And that what can come along with this is a sense of anxiety, depression, and hopelessness. And so when somebody asked, multiple people ask, how do I motivate my team? I thought, well, it's probably pretty important to have this kind of this conversation, because when the team is not motivated, what might be happening is that they are mourning something that has been lost, right? And that has gone unacknowledged, right? And maybe it's a loss of the familiar. Maybe it's a loss of all the things I was going to do in 2020. Maybe it was a loss of, it could be a loss of work, or it could be, it could be an actual loss of somebody who may have died, right? So learning how to have this kind of conversation, I think, going forward is going to be more and more important, which is one of the reasons why I wrote that article. So the zombie zone or the gestation zone is not entirely negative. And that's what's very important to know, right? I think it is helpful to think about it in terms of a period of repatterning, right? That you're moving from one way of being to another way of being. And that and this has already come up this afternoon already, right? That you learn new ways of working, right? And it's also a time to explore and experiment, right? And to move to a new world, by definition, means doing something you haven't done before. And that's the positive aspect of this, right? That's the positive aspect, that you get to explore and experiment and try new things. And I think what we found is that the positive aspect of this whole COVID stuff is that, wow, there are certain things that we can do way more efficiently, right? I don't need to travel as much. I don't need to have a face-to-face meeting necessarily to be effective, right? I mean, even though Zoom has its downsides, I think many of us have discovered that, it actually has a lot of upsides as well. So the exploring and experimenting, I think, is essential, right? With new ways of working, new patterns of behavior, trying on new identities. I think trying on new roles that you can play. I like to think about it like you've outgrown a wardrobe. You need to go to the store and buy a new wardrobe. And now you're at the store trying to put on this wardrobe, look in the mirror and say, okay, is this me? And oftentimes it will not be you. And so the stamina that we need is to keep trying on the new outfit, right? Even though it might be disheartening or frustrating, is to keep trying it on till something like you look in the mirror and think, oh, this isn't bad, right? So this is where being comfortable with discomfort is so helpful, right? Because understand that if you're feeling miserable, that's what this period of life is about, right? If I think about the caterpillar, that it's on its way to a butterfly, goes through this kind of pupal stage, like I always wonder, what is it thinking? Like, what is it feeling, right? Like, what the heck is going on with me, right? It's uncomfortable, right? Think about your adolescence. That's a transition period, right? Lord knows, why do we venerate youth? Nobody I know ever wants to go back to being their teenage selves, right? Think about how painful that was. All the pimples, the braces, the awkward voices, all of that stuff, right? That's in a way where we're at now, right? And so thinking about also another kind of figure eight of having time alone, right? Time alone to kind of recollect, to make assess where are you at, what's important to you, what are your values, right? And then taking those insights and going back out into community, right? Sharing with those, getting feedback, and then going back in. And that the period of this gestation is a period, when you do it well, I think, is a period of going inside yourself in isolation and solitude, and then coming back out into community and connection. So, if you read the article, the reason I got into this was, as you know, in 2008, I had a kidney transplant after living with 17 years with this kidney disease. And as I was on my way out the hospital, my physician handed me a prescription for an antidepressant. I look at it and I think, why would I need this, right? But the majority of organ rejection happens within the first 3 months of the surgery. So the first 3 months, was a kind of constant questioning of like, oh my goodness, am I going to live? And then we hit that benchmark or that landmark. And then the next 6 months we're like, oh wow, I'm going to live. And then at the 9-month mark, it was like, oh my God, I'm going to live. And boom, I went straight into a really profound depression. And then I realized that's why they gave me this prescription. They knew it was going to happen, right? And they wanted to treat it chemically when, you know, what was really happening was a profound shift in identity, right? You're living basically your whole adult life with this disease, thinking you're going to be dead at 30, and that suddenly you've been given new lease on life. You think, hey, that's great. Why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? Why am I no longer interested in being alive, right? And it was because of this process, right? This is what happens in transition. And so that's what got me interested in all of this. And so I had to explore and experiment. And I came up with rules for myself when I'm in transition, right? Which was to turn down no invitation, right? To go someplace I'd never been, learn how to do something I didn't know how to do, right? And because it was all about seeking out a world I didn't yet know, and trying on new outfits to see what worked. And it took a long time, right? It lasted a lot longer than I wanted it to last. But there's also an aspect of this of taking time to heal, to rest, to sleep, right? So in any case, right? So that's what we do. And again, another one of my students who worked for a defense contractor, and you probably know that for a lot of companies like that, they work on projects, and when the project is finished, they have to jump to another project, or else if there's no project for them to jump to, they don't have a job. And my student was, I would say, I think 4 months away from her project being done and no new project in sight. And she said, you know, I was stuck in the black zone. I was paralyzed with fear. Right? And I didn't know what I was going to do. And in the middle of the class, she said, I woke up, she said, I'm sick and tired of living with fear all the time. And she went downstairs, turned on the stereo, cranked Bob Marley as loud as she could, and, you know, was dancing by herself, at which point her young daughter and husband woke up, came downstairs and said, Mom, what's going on? And she said, you know, I'm tired of living in fear, and I'm dancing to step away from my fear. And so then the three of them decided they were going to do this together. 3 o'clock in the morning, they're dancing to Bob Marley. 2 weeks later, she had a new job. I'm not saying there's causality there, but life is a lot easier when you decide not to let fear run it. And she was a powerful teacher for me in seeing, oh, it's possible for a human being to step out of fear. So, you know, so that's why I think we've kind of heavy pedaled the conversation around fear in this series, which I hope has been helpful for you. So, okay, then we are kind of on our way into the new beginning, and we gradually emerge into a new sense of identity, right? And that you begin to embody the new role. You'll probably embody the new role before you realize you're doing that. There's a sense of renewal that comes along. You know, Stella gets her groove back at some level. The world, so now we have to talk about, shall we say, what I call non-rational phenomena. Okay, but this has just been my observation over 10 years of teaching this class, or, you know, really kind of guiding people through this class. I'm not sure if I really teach anything, but you will start to have dreams, and it's very not uncommon for people to have dreams that signal the transition is happening, right? And oftentimes they'll get a signal that, okay, the new beginning is happening. And I know I had one. I have several students who have them. But so the key is to like pay attention to that and don't disregard it, right? That you'll get signals, right? The world will send you signals at some level. For me, it was the first time I won a teaching award, actually, after my surgery and getting through that. And then suddenly I won a teaching award, which kind of reaffirmed my belief that, oh, maybe this is the outfit I should wear. And so start to look for those sorts of things, right? And the other thing is that, you know, I taught this class for a client was also a financial services client, to help their workforce deal with change because they were stuck in this process. Some of them were, that we go through this process first of denial, anger, and shock, and then we kind of move through frustration and anger and fear, and then we sink down at the bottom, right? We hit low, we hit the bottom. And some of us will start trying to crawl back up, right? But this is coated with Teflon and just keeps sliding down. You can't go back to the golden past, right? And so we have a choice then, right? I could lie down here and drink or smoke or snort something and just kind of wallow. Or I could exert the energy and move through the cynicism or skepticism that anything good may ever happen again, right? And keep climbing, keep climbing, keep climbing. And then you start to see kind of green shoots emerging from the branches. And so, understand this is what happens. And so that's why, in a sense, this conversation comes after all the other conversations we had, right? You have to understand this process. And so, and not to be afraid or to think that the uncomfortable emotions you're experiencing are pathological, right? Sometimes this is just the way it is in terms of how we grow as human beings. And I have to say that it took me an embarrassingly long period of time to realize that going through this process of transition, right, that something ends, that we're on our way to a new beginning, and we move through this transformational phase in the middle, is how adults grow, right? Like my son, who's in the next room, who you've probably been hearing over the last month, his biological processes are automatic. He's going to grow no matter what we do, right? My job as his parent is not to screw the process up too much, right? But for adults, once you hit 18, 25, maybe 40, right, that process stops. And the automatic part of the process stops. And that adult development has to be intentional, right? So the intentional part is deciding that when I'm stuck here, I'm going to keep on climbing, right? I'm going to keep on climbing. And so that's what I want to encourage you to do, no matter how stuck you feel, how despondent you might feel, how hopeless you think this whole situation is. I want to encourage you to keep on climbing, okay? That if you were to make a map, one of the things I do is ask my students to make a list of all the changes they've experienced so far in their lives. And then talk about how did you get through each one of them. And then we talk about them all. And as a group, so everybody gives a little presentation. And then at the end, and it takes all day, you hear, okay, this changed and this ended. I had to learn these skills. I had to let this kind of attitude or this kind of mindset go. And here's the new beginning I emerged into. And if you listen to those stories over and over and over and over again, you realize that not only have you been here before, that humans have been here before, that your ancestors have likely been here before, and we made it, right? And so you can make this one too. That's the message I want to send to you, right? You can make this one too. So we did this process for my client of helping people, and the whole idea of this course was to create a cadre within the firm, which is about 500 people, of people who were skilled at dealing with change and transition, and so that they could serve as a core of people to help the rest of the firm deal with change and transition, right? And so because, right, you might be here, right? You might be here. They and your team are also in transition. Everybody's in transition, and the organization is in transition itself, right? So to be able to have facility with working with this way of seeing the world, I think is going to become increasingly more important. So we finished this course, I think it achieved its intended effect. And then we all looked up and said, oh, wait a minute, there's not just one change that's going to happen, right? COVID starts, we all disperse, we're all working from home. What happens when we have to come back, right? That's going to be a different world. And so kind of unwittingly, all of us realized, oh, we were actually not working to help them deal with the past, but we're also working to help them deal with the future of what was coming, right? So what happens when work from home starts to phase out? And we are now different people, right? Let's face it, we are different people now than we were in March. And we've gotten used to a different set of expectations. And so about travel, about what work is, about childcare, somebody said, I'm a homeschooling teacher, right? And things have shifted. So when we come back, who are we going to be, right? And I think that's, again, kind of why this conversation is even more important to have now. So, and why I wanted to offer this up to you. So you have these tools to be able to talk about. So again, I work through asking questions, and here are some questions you might want to ask yourself, right? So, what has ended, right? And not just think about the obvious ones. Now, let me pause for a second also, right? If you had to take a little map of ending, transition period, or zombie zone, new beginning, status quo, I'm okay, right? Take that map. Now think about all the different departments of your life, right? Work is obviously one of them. If you're a parent, parenting is another one. Education might be another thing. Your spiritual life, finances, travel, your parents' health, all of that, right? Think about all the major departments of your life, and then see what zone are you in each one of them. And I will bet that you will find that you are not only in one transition, you are in multiple transitions. And that some might be an ending, some might be in the neutral zone or the zombie zone, some might be in the new beginning, and some might be, I'm status quo, I'm okay on this, right? And then if you put that all on a piece of paper and take a look at it and you realize, oh, here's why I feel a little nuts, it's because, hey, my whole life is shifting, right? So see what you find, okay? See what you find. So question to ask yourself, what has ended, and are you accepting of that? A client of mine, I think I talked about her before. She said, what had ended for me was my father has Alzheimer's. And what ended was the father that I knew when I was a child, right? He wasn't there anymore. And I realized that I wasn't accepting that I was resisting the hell out of it, and that it wasn't helping my family, right? And that I had to get to acceptance that this was our new reality so that I could help not only my dad, but the rest of our family kind of adapt to this, right? So sometimes the level of acceptance or the level of non-acceptance can be kind of subtle. So, and here's where, your capacity to be honest with yourself is important. What might you have to let go of, right? What might you have to let go of? Could be a belief, identity, an assumption of or the way the world is, an assumption about yourself, right? What support systems do you have? And I think, and we haven't really talked about this a lot, but every sustainably successful executive I know, right? Somebody whose life, you admire, what I've found is that they all have created a support system that's outside of their, primary relationship, right? And that the support system could be a coach, it could be a therapist, it could be a trainer, it could be a masseuse, it could be, I know one guy who was a banker, incidentally, got into manicures, right? And he's like, okay, my wife does these all the time, and now I see why. It's like, somebody just pays attention to me for an hour. It's amazing, right? So, so think about what is that for you? And it can be multiple people, right? Especially if you're in a leadership position and you're in the position of having to put out energy and support other people, then the converse question is, who's supporting you, right? And ideally that should be a team of people. They don't necessarily have to know each other, right? Or like get together in the Hall of Justice periodically, but there should be a team of people that take care of different aspects of who you are. So then next question, like what new relationships can you forge, right? And new networks and new, it could be new professional networks, it could be new social networks, and that you probably have more networks and you're involved in more networks than you realize. What capabilities do you need to learn how to do, right? And to step into the new world, what new might you expose yourself to? one of my favorite stories about this particular idea. So I'm an architecture freak, and I will travel around the world just to look at a building. And there's a Japanese architect whose work I quite admire. And he, at the end of the late 1990s, he was hitting a point in his career where he was so frustrated that he was thinking about giving up the profession. And he said, one last gambit, I decided to travel around the world to meet with the architects whose work I admired, and to see like what did they do to sustain themselves. And what he realized was that they didn't see themselves like he saw himself, right? He saw himself as, oh, I'm the genius auteur that you're lucky to work with, right? And I'm going to make a building for you. That the people he actually really deeply admired didn't hold that position about themselves. That the people he admired who did consistently creative work over a long period of time saw themselves as orchestra conductors or symphony conductors. And it's like, I'm not going to make this. We're going to make this. And it transformed how he managed his firm, right? And it transformed how he saw himself. So he let go of the identity of like, I'm the genius you're lucky to work with, to I'm now a conduit to help you realize your dreams and goals. And he said, before maybe I would have met with a client, or somebody from my firm would have met with a client 5 or 6 times. And he goes, now we meet with a client like 100 times. And often he does a lot of public works projects. And so the community is creating these things. And the work, and then the other thing they needed to know how to do was they had to know how to make use different kinds of software that they didn't know how to do before, which allowed them to work with different kind of materials. And it completely transformed the buildings he made. And that the before buildings and the after buildings are completely different. And you could see this sense of transformative renewal that this man underwent. And it was really amazing and one of my favorite stories. So to that end, like, what do you need to stop doing, right? So last week, a lot of people said, my unwanted result is that I complain a lot, right? Okay, well, maybe that's something to stop doing, right? And then how much energy would you free up if you did that? And then likewise, like, what do you need to start doing, right? What do you need to start doing? So, I put on 10 pounds in COVID. And so I realized that what I need to start doing is moving my body. So Wednesday, I made an appointment with a trainer, and I'm gonna get back to my 155 sooner or later, and maybe my college era pants will yet once again fit again. And so anyway, so what do you need to stop doing? What do you need to start doing? So takeaways for today, right? Changes happen outside you. Transitions happen inside you, right? They're an inner shift about who you think you are, your role, your value, what you have to contribute to the world, what you know, right? Third thing, transitions have 3 unique stages, right? And that they require efforts to keep going through, right? They don't happen automatically. And unfortunately, transitions can fail, right? If you don't make the effort. And we all know those, right? Maybe you've been to your high school reunion and there's the person that shows up still with their varsity jacket and their class ring on, and that, that they're the living embodiment of a Bruce Springsteen song, right? That the glory days were still happening, but they're happening, 25 years ago, right? So transitions can fail, and we have to make the effort to keep going, okay? And that an essential part of this process is to be okay with the fact that you are not comfortable, right? To be okay with the fact that you're not comfortable. And then when you know that a change is going to happen, you can start to address it early on. When my wife and I were waiting for our son to be born, we made a list of all the stuff we wanted to experience that we probably wouldn't be able to do, once we had a baby. And then we just kind of systematically went through them, right? So when you know that, you can start to, and that's when you're starting to get good at managing changes, right? So as I said, like, this is a skill, right? It's a skill you can learn how to do. And I learned how to do it. If I can learn how to do it, you can learn how to do it, right? So, all right, that's all I have for today. I hope that is helpful. My goal in doing this program was to equip you with a set of fundamental tools and practices and frameworks to really help you understand how to make sense of what is going on inside you, and then practices, ideally like practical things that you can do to connect this to your external action. And I hope that I met that goal and that this was useful for you. But I'd be curious to know, like, what did you get out of this, right? What did you get out of this? And the other goal I had was to really support the Mindfulness on Wall Street team to support their efforts. That what they're doing is quite incredible, and it's an act of incredible generosity, and it takes a lot of time and effort to put these things together. And I just wanted to make sure that that their efforts are acknowledged and to support them as best I could. Jolie, thank you for reposting your question. You have a recommendation for someone who needs help with acceptance. In general, look at what is being resisted, right? What is being resisted? And then what is behind that resistance, right? What's behind that resistance? A lot of ideas how to think through what's happening. Wonderful. Yeah. So, Sarah, let me turn it over to you. I kept my end of the bargain. I managed to 7 seconds to spare.
We just want to say thank you on behalf of Mindful on Wall Street, on behalf of everyone that attended, that we are immensely grateful for the wisdom and the insights and the energy that you shared with us. To continue to stay connected with Dr. Hunter's speaking engagements, everyone, you can connect with him on his LinkedIn page. If you want to book Dr. Hunter for your team or your organization, we will include his details in our follow-up email that we send to the group this week. And thank you again to everyone in the audience for having joined us on this journey of learning and self-reflection over these past 5 weeks. Many of you have showed up to every single one.
Yeah, it's been great.
And we appreciate your participation. We have 2 really exciting announcements from the Mindful on Wall Street team as we continue to create and evolve our offerings. So as many of you know, on Saturday was World Mental Health Day. And next week, 1 week from today at the same time, we will be hosting a very special fireside chat with Nathan Romano. He is the President Emeritus of the Board of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NYC Metro Chapter, and President and Chief Operating Officer of York Capital Management, which is an $18 billion hedge fund. He's also held leadership roles at Goldman Sachs, where he was one of my mentors, at Credit Suisse and at Bear Stearns. This will be a very intimate look into what it is like to hold a mindfulness practice as a senior person in financial services, and how it can support your life as a C-suite hedge fund exec. And he'll share about how a mindfulness practice can be used as a tool to support mental health and self-compassion. Secondly, our second fun announcement for the group is to help continue supporting this community of banks, hedge funds, and other financial services firms that have joined us. Mindful on Wall Street will be launching weekly 30-minute mindfulness meditation and discussion sessions starting on Monday, October 26th at 5 p.m. Eastern via Zoom. These sessions will include a 15 to 20-minute guided meditation and then a 10-minute guided discussion on applications of the practice and how we can apply them into the workplace. These sessions will continue on every Monday through December 14th and will be led by one of our 8 facilitators. Please feel free to share with your friends and colleagues, even if they haven't joined us or if they would be a new member of the community. You can register for both on mindfulonwallstreet.org/events. And to stay connected on our latest offerings, Please follow us on our LinkedIn page and of course follow Dr. Jeremy Hunter. Thank you for joining and we hope to see you next week.
Oh, I have an announcement too, by the way. I have a new podcast called
Amazing.
on Untaught, which I completely forgot about. Untaught Essentials. Episode 2 actually deals with money. And if you work with people who deal with money, or you have clients who are, if you're their financial advisor, I think you'll find it super helpful. But it's called Untaught Essentials. It's kind of me and somebody very interesting having a conversation. Episode 1 is about why do we fear death? And the episode 2 is about how is money ruining your life? And episode 3 is about love. And episode 4 will be about the human future of work.
Well, thank you, everyone. And we will see you in the weeks going forward. And
thank you, everyone. Yeah. Take care, everybody.